when you're talking about building reputation, the reputation of the building, also building a reputation of the building. It's tough to transition an entire building complex that a community, everybody knows, for instance, as a rough area or a rough apartment complex to, hey, I just did all this work. It's super beautiful. We want all these Class A or B tenants, but everybody still thinks of it as a Class C building. And so that transition is, one, a challenge, two, important, and three, recognizing it is best sometimes to just clear house, start fresh if possible, and build out the type of property, the type of clientele that you really want and need for your building.
Certain tenants bring around other undesirables, and now all of a sudden you have a bunch of people around this complex that have no business being there and are disturbing other tenants, and it was a disaster for a bit.
Yeah. I just show up to do my laundry and there's somebody sleeping in it. It's pretty much deal breaker for me. I'm getting right out of that apartment building. All right, how we doing, brother? How are you today?
I was having a conversation, bud, and you just came in and interrupted me. Wow, coming in hot, bud.
Yeah, you needed some energy. It just seemed like you just weren't bringing it to the table today, and I really needed more from you. I wanted you to come with a kick drum.
This is our first one today. What are you talking about?
Come with a kick drum, Gary. Come.
Gary?
Come with a kick drum, Gary. Come. You ever see that movie?
No, is that good? What is it?
I think it was, I was going to say Along Came Polly, but that's not right.
With Pauly Shore?
No, I
remember Pauly Shore.
Yeah, I remember Pauly Shore.
A character, man.
Yeah. What was the one with Pauly Shore, and he had, was it Blast from the Past? What was that one movie?
Showgirls?
That's what it's called?
Yeah.
I don't think it's called Showgirls. I think that's way off. I'm thinking of that I think he was like a dinosaur or something. No, there was a dinosaur in there, or maybe he looked like
Terminator?
Not what?
No.
Is there a dinosaur in Terminator?
Probably.
That's Arnold.
It probably just
Could you imagine it's Pauly Shore as Terminator? Terminator 4. Back for vengeance. We couldn't get Arnie, so we got Pauly Shore.
No, I do remember one. Dinosaurs in it from him, but I can't remember. It was, it had Brendan Fraser in it.
Yeah.
Encino Man.
That's
a classic.
That is a good one. Maybe we watch that tonight.
Cool, yeah. You just want to keep talking about movies? Or?
Yeah, it would be cool.
Yeah, do some movie reviews instead of real estate.
Maybe we call up Pauly Shore and ask him to be the next Terminator. Maybe with all of our videos now, our editing skills, things like that, we could actually be the videographers for Terminator 4.
Yeah, if only people could see our setup right now. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, pretty good. This one's for you, Pauly Shore. If you would like to be on Terminator 4 with us as your videographers, please let us know. We can also write the scripts too.
We're good script writers.
Yeah. ChatGPT can write us a nice script for Terminator 4.
It's amazing. That should be a topic for another podcast.
That will be a topic.
How we've integrated chat into our real estate business.
Yeah. And where we see the potential of it going as well. It just is unfolding. I think everybody's still learning what it can and will do for everybody there.
It's nuts how new it is and how big of an impact it's already made.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, outside of Terminator 4, Pauly Shore, and Encino Man that we were planning to talk about, what we learned about our first apartments. Let's go ahead and talk about that. Hercules.
Yeah, man, it was eye-opening. For me personally, by the time we bought our first apartment together, at that time I had north of 100 properties, single families, and I was like, dude, I've been through everything. Don't want to say I know everything. You always learn stuff. But it's like, what's the difference between buying a single family and then buying I think our first one was at 12 units? Or was it Woolworth and 29th?
Yeah, it was a package, but so two buildings. One was 12 unit, one was 24 unit.
Yeah.
Ton of renovations, so everything was ongoing at the same time, which was a learning lesson in and of itself.
But. Yeah, just some really basic stuff though, buying the first apartment that you don't think about, at least you don't come across in the single family space. So there's definitely some learning lessons from that first one.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, let's start you off.
Okay.
What was...
Bring it on.
Yeah, what was one thing you learned that comes to mind from buying those first two gems?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different, I'll call them categories. So I'll start from the acquisition side of it. Like maybe we'll go all the way through to even just the sale of it at the end, right? Yeah. We did sell 29th. We refied on Woolworth, but for me, the front end piece of underwriting the property was different than how we have ever underwritten any of the single family properties that we've owned. And it's, I'll say it, much more basic when you're looking at just a single family house and you're looking at income of what I could do. And we usually have historically really done long-term leases. Now I've done like short-term and mid-term as well, but in general, long-term is easier to sort of project. You understood the market, we understood the market. So you could almost do napkin off the cusp math and say, okay, I know this is a good deal in a few minutes, or even just by looking at it, like I know this is good or bad. For us, this was a learning lesson of, we're not sure what things are good or bad. We recognize what properties are trading for. We underwrote, or we were underwriting other deals as well. So we were getting our practice, I'll call it, but hadn't pulled the trigger until these guys. And so that was kind of one of the first pieces, is what spreadsheets are we using, and how are we going to analyze this deal? How are we going to underwrite this 12-plex and 24-plex, right?
Yeah.
It starts to get a lot more complicated as you add these doors. It's not as simple.
And they're valued differently too than single family.
Yeah, 100%. So that's an important piece too. We had touched on a little bit prior to this episode in a different episode, but the idea that they're valued based on your net operating income and a cap rate. Basically, you take your NOI divided by a cap rate, and you end up with a value of the property, let's say. And so your net operating income is driven by your income minus expenses. And so if you can drive up income, you can substantially increase the value of your house. Same thing, if you can decrease expenses, you can substantially increase the value of your house. Whereas single family, you are really, the value is dictated and predicated upon what the comparables are in the neighborhood. There's a little bit of that in multifamily.
You were saying those two words wrong. You were just saying multifamily was based off cap rates and stuff, and then single family, you just said multifamily is based off comparables.
Oh, I said yeah. Single family is based off
back comparables. To earth, Adam.
Yeah, thank you. keeping me on par.
Oh, I am. But...
So single family is based off comparables.
Yeah.
Multifamily is based off of your net operating income and cap rates. And there's a little bit of what's happening in the neighborhood for multifamily as well. If somebody next door sells for a certain price, certain per door, that usually does help, your property, for instance. But anyway, so the way that we were underwriting it was different. It was new to us. We had to learn the underwriting process. So starting there, next step, I would say the negotiation and the type of sellers are traditionally a little different in multifamily, larger complex. They are more often, I'll call them like sophisticated investors, in that it's not just somebody, they had their house and they might be moving, or they need to get out, or whatever the case may be. And that's one type of individual for single family. Multifamily tends to be business operators. You might have somebody that just has one, but more often I would say people have a bunch of apartment complexes. And so they understand, and again, I use the word more sophisticated type of investor, but you have to recognize that there's no wool pulled over the eyes. You're coming to the table, you're having those types of conversations. And so you come at the negotiation in a different way with multifamily than you would with single family. So to me, those were some of the big important learning lessons, differences at the front end as well. And then we talked about insurance claims and things like that. It's more drastic, larger on a multifamily, and that's an important piece of our overall negotiation on any of our houses, but in particular within multifamily as well.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of start there, as acquisition was newer to us, even though you had been through, I mean, hundreds, if you count all of your acquisitions when you were, on the just transaction side, it's literally thousands.
Yeah.
So this was, new for both of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll kind of start there. How about for you? Maybe let's take it. All right, now we've acquired the property. Now what? Yeah. What were some of the next learning lessons for you?
Even little things, like one thing that stands out is what I would call key management, let's say. So we bought Woolworth and 29th. How many units was that combined?
26.
26 units combined. Mm-hmm. So getting 26 sets of keys, not only for the units themselves, the common areas, all the entrances into the buildings, the laundry rooms, utility rooms. So at closing, you get this big pile of keys. And with single family, it doesn't really happen. Like, you'll get a set of keys, but oftentimes, with us anyways, we go over the property right away, change out locks, and we use our own keys. So with multifamily, that was a big thing. We got this big set of keys, and it's like, oh, okay, didn't really think about this. The keys had some labels on it, went through everything, kind of looked like everything was there, set them to the side. But then as we moved into operations and rehabbing this thing and wanting to access units, come to find out, half those keys didn't work. They were old keys. Some units would have literally 10 keys associated with it, and it just became a huge cluster. So key management was one of those things that's like, okay, we got to figure out a process for this. So for us, it's when you acquire a building, we'll immediately go in and we'll change out every single lock on that building. And sometimes larger buildings, you spend a chunk of money doing it, but we'll change everything out to our master locks. Our locks happen to have, our deadbolts have 2 key cylinders, one for tenant access, and then you can rotate the face of the cylinder to expose a master key. So that way we have one master key that can get into an entire apartment complex for us. But then that way, now that we've changed everything out, now we have way less keys, and we actually know what those keys are for. Mm-hmm. Last point to key management would also be mailbox keys. Mm-hmm. We, not knowing, again, you don't know what you don't know, but now looking back on it, the mailbox keys are something that we weren't super diligent to making sure that we had. Again, we just got a pile of keys. There's probably 50, 60, 70 keys altogether. So just assume kind of more or less everything was there. Honestly didn't think about it twice. But mailbox keys, not having those, that becomes pretty pricey to get mailbox keys, because what you have to do is the post office will have to come out and drill out locks. And then in Omaha, for example, that's about $7,500 for every lock that they're drilling out and replacing. So when you don't have mailbox keys for 26 units, we had some keys. It's not like we didn't have any, but that cost can add up super quick that you just weren't expecting. So It really started to stand out. It's like, okay, next purchase, we've got to be diligent about at least mailbox keys, because like I said, now we just go in and change out all the locks regardless anyways.
How about keyless entry? So a lot of apartment buildings, we were initially thinking of going that way. We've seen others.
Yeah.
It seems great from a key management perspective.
Yeah.
But obviously we didn't go that route pretty much for all of our buildings today.
We do have it on Lafayette, just a laundry room though.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, looking into it.
All of them, yeah.
Looking into it, they're definitely more suited for Class A type buildings. I'd say Woolworth and 29th were more Class B. 29th was probably Class C. But yeah, the cost was really expensive to get those installed, and then also getting the tenants on board to use those type of keys. It just wasn't didn't make sense in our scenario. But like I said, definitely on Class A, going something to keyless type entry can be a cost savings in the long run, because you're not having to change out as many locks as you would on with traditional locks. But again, there's definitely that big cost up front for you to be able to implement something like that.
Yeah. And one of the cost factors that played into it was just people utilizing it, but also potentially destroying the locks. We go out and spend all this money, and somebody comes along and damages those locks. And in 29th and Woolworth that we had picked up, we'll touch on this in a second about the type of tenants that we had, but there were people in there that were even inviting over people that were damaging specific areas in the property or doing damaging. So it was hard for us to even go back and trace who was doing this to the property. So in a scenario like that, we just put in all these nice new door locks and somebody screws up a bunch of them, and we can't go pull back our costs. And now we're just eating it. Whereas, a deadbolt sort of thing, really hard to screw up. And again, if it is, much cheaper to go out and replace. So those were some of the big factors that played into it, but definitely a nice feature to have of like keyless entry sort of thing. You could have remote access, remote access to folks. And
that should be almost a topic for another episode, is just all the different automations that can go into buildings now, between the entries and thermostats and you name it. There's a lot of technologies and automations that you could potentially put in when you're buying a new building.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Jump in, I guess, then next to building reputation, because we talked about just keys for a while, right? Like we're learning lessons again. First, we've been kind of using both apartment complexes as an example because we had purchased them at the same time. So that's why we're talking kind of about both. They're really close to each other in Omaha, Nebraska. One was 12 unit, one was 24 unit, and sort of down the street, not too far from one another, but the clientele when both was rough. One of the buildings, 29th, was rougher.
Rough.
Yeah, really rough. So looking at that building reputation, we had talked about one of the learning lessons at a high level we've communicated in other episodes, but really one of those learning lessons was the fact that it is a community that you are building and you're supporting. And if you have a bad egg, and especially bad if you have a bunch of bad eggs, doesn't matter what you do to the property and the internal of the units, as beautiful as it is, some really good, strong tenant isn't really going to want to stay right next to somebody that is an extremely rough, disrespectful to the property, and just a little bit even crazy. We tell some crazies out there for sure. And so it was a learning lesson for both of us that when we underwrote it, we thought we were gonna just, as people move out, we will just turn over units. So we're not gonna see this just massive drop off of income. We might see it sort of dip a little bit as we're turning units, but we're gonna use the cash flow from the property. And how we underwrote it, it was just looking super sexy. It was, we can go out and make these repairs with existing cash flow. We'll have some reserves that we can go out and do it. But what we found was tenants were rougher than we recognized or understood. I think that was a learning lesson for us as well of our underwriting process. We go through every single unit now. We went through most of the units, but then some of them we didn't have access to, and we were a little...
It was a cluster for sure.
So now we're going to get into every unit. We're going to meet as many tenants as possible,
regardless how big the complex is. When we had that multifamily under contract in Des Moines, well, during that time period, we probably viewed a couple hundred units, and we went into every single one. And it's a must. It
is. Because not only do you see each of the units, which is important, right? You have a true sense of any renovations, how bad the units are, any of that. But secondly, an important piece of this as well as you meet the tenants.
Absolutely.
So we're taking notes all along the way of, oh, this is going to be a challenge for us. This will be rough. We'll probably have to evict this person along the way. Or this is a great tenant. Let's do everything we can to keep him or her in the property.
Absolutely.
So that was, when you're talking about building reputation, the reputation of the building. Also building a reputation of the building. It's tough to transition an entire building complex that a community, everybody knows, for instance, as a rough area or a rough apartment complex to, hey, I just did all this work. It's super beautiful. We want all these Class A or B tenants, but everybody still thinks of it as a Class C building. And so that transition is, one, a challenge, two, important, and three, recognizing it is best sometimes to just clear house, start fresh if possible, and build out the type of property, the type of clientele that you really want and need for your building.
That was one of the biggest ones for us on 29th, was get into it, like you said, and just want to do a few rehabs, try to keep that income steady. But then shortly after we got those units rehabbed and the new tenants that were moving in, the new tenants were starting to complain about certain things that you wouldn't, looking back on it, it's obvious that they'd be complaining about this stuff, but in our heads, it's like, okay, now we got this brand new, super nice unit. That's all that really matters, and we'll get great tenants. And that's not the case. So after a while, I think after we rehabbed the first maybe 3 or 4, we realized, hey, we got to get the rest of these guys out. Because like you were saying earlier, certain tenants bring around other undesirables, and now all of a sudden you have a bunch of people around this complex that have no business being there and are disturbing other tenants. And it was a disaster for a bit. How many times we found squatters in the laundry room of 29th. And it's because, like you said, there were some people in there that should have been gone from the very beginning, and some of them were through assistance programs trying to end the homelessness, which we try to support. But they would be bringing around other homeless people, and they'd be crashing in their units. So sometimes they would have 4, 5, 6 people staying in their unit when it was only a 1-bedroom. They would allow their guest into our laundry rooms to sleep in there, and you put all this money into a unit and you try to attract a good tenant. Obviously, no good tenant is going to want to stay in an apartment where this type of stuff is going on. So
I just show up to do my laundry and there's somebody sleeping in it. It's pretty much deal breaker for me. I'm getting right out of that apartment building.
And then one thing too, after we learned that and we did clean house and got everybody out, you learn how efficient it is to be able to work on multiple units at once. Because we mentioned before, it's oftentimes when you're fixing, especially let's say plumbing issues in one unit, typically those plumbing issues you have to get into multiple units to fix it. And when you get into those other units, depending on the extent of what's being done, you're tearing out walls to access plumbing and things like that. So it's not just something minor that you do. So being able to get everybody out and just access to every single unit to do exactly what you need to do was a big help for us. Now we realize it's like, hey, when we go in, this is what the game plan is now. So now when we underwrite, it instead of trying to keep the income steady, we underwrite it saying, hey, for this first, whatever it is, 4, 5, 6, 7 months, we're going to have next to nothing for income because we're going to go in and clear all these people out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always end up conservatively underwriting that we think the rehab might take us 2. We might put in our spreadsheet, it might take us 4. Or 5 even, just to be able to be safe and expect some hiccups along the way. And if it is in 2, great, awesome. The numbers just are even that much sexier in the building. But if it works at 4 or 5 months that we're holding cash, let's say, or doing those renovations over that period of time, and it makes sense on paper, then we're safe, right? And that's most important. You don't want to be stretched so thin on the underwriting piece that everything has to go perfect for you to make the margins that you were expecting with the building. Because everybody knows in real estate and with projects like that, a lot of hiccups can happen, right?
Yeah, 29th is a perfect example of that, where we end up going in and that property was so neglected for so long. The more we started tearing this stuff, the more issues we saw. To at one point, we had exterior walls that we had to take down. Certain units we had to take down to studs. Had to replace some trusses. It was a lot.
I remember walking those units with you and our contractor, kind of general GC, in particular the bottom two that were just completely gutted, and they found just like rat carcasses all over the place in that building, or that unit specifically. And so it was just sort of rough. It was in rough shape. And to get to then the plumbing issues, you had to go into the next unit above it. That it just was this spiral effect that the team did a great job and got it up and running. And that building, that 29th, I don't know if we're getting to this point yet, but sold it for over 100% gain. So that was a year and a half later.
Great, yeah.
So it was some learning lessons along the way for sure. I guess, what additional, outside of, let's say, building reputation, if we're kind of following that path from acquisition to sale, would you say would be some of the additional learning lessons?
Part of it was the amount of initial maintenance requests that come in. So like you said, we view every unit. We love to see tenants, meet tenants, talk to tenants, especially when we're under contract, having conversations with tenants on how the current management company is, or landlord, whoever is managing that building, how they are. Do they take care of maintenance requests right away? Do you have a lot of issues with your unit? That can expose a lot of stuff that you can't see on paper, and some stuff you can't really see just from walking the units either, in regards to how neglected certain things are. And 29th is a perfect example. Not until we started tearing into things did we really start to expose how neglected some things were. So being able to talk to tenants about how the current management company is, specifically when it comes to maintenance, that's kind of our biggest thing, is when it comes to maintenance, how well they've done. And then also at the same time, letting them know, hey, we're going to be coming in, we're going to be investing quite a bit of money into this place. So we want to know everything that's wrong with your unit. One, to find out what's wrong just up front, but then two, so we can make some notes on our side. So when we do buy it, we have a list of stuff saying, hey, unit 12, we need to go in. This is what the tenant's complaining about. So that way, when you go in and tenants see, hey, these guys are actually on top of stuff. They're coming in, they're being proactive, they're fixing everything that need to fix. That can help turn around tenants' attitudes and tenants that want to stay, and being able to retain some long-term tenants. Because some tenants, like, they'll put up with that stuff for so long, and then again, we talked about it in a different episode, turnover is what kills you on rentals. So being able to get into these units and knowing what needs to be fixed and actually going in there and fixing it right away is a big help. And at the same time too, it's one of those things, when you give a tenant an opportunity to open up and talk about maintenance, it's kind of, usually it's an issue for them. Then they just spill the beans on all sorts of stuff. It can go from issues with their unit to issues with the building to issues with their neighbor's unit to stuff that you don't even ask, but the conversation just starts to lead in a direction where you can get out a lot of valuable nuggets from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can utilize that information to, one, go back to the seller and say, hey, you have all of these issues.
You're a scumbag.
Yeah. You are a dirtball, and you should really take better care of these individuals, for starters, right?
They're your customers.
Secondly, to go back to them for seller credits, or make sure that they complete these renovations or complete the deferred maintenance before closing, which was what we had renegotiated and threw in an amendment on the deal in Des Moines, which was basically everything needs to be rent ready. You're going to go out and fix all the deferred maintenance issues that we have found. And we went through again every single unit. So there was a list built out that, hey, you need to go handle all of these things, along with anything else that pops up as well. That's important, right? Like a water leak, and you're not going to close for another 60, 90 days would be and could be very significant by the time that you pick it up. So one, again, go back to the seller and either negotiating costs, lower sale price, credits at sale, them to complete the renovations, any of those things. But you can utilize it as essentially firepower, negotiation, opportunity.
That's a good point.
Two, understanding the people, understanding the true state of the property, the building, the units, what you're really taking on. So I think that's an important piece for underwriting, understanding, hey, are we going to have 100K right off the bat, or is this going to be just kind of a little easy, light renovation, maybe 5-10K as people turn over, and that's a completely different ball game. So understanding that at least is really, really important, because that could be a swing of very profitable building that you're underwriting to, I'm in the red and looking to get some more cash to invest into this property. So to me, those are kind of the big pieces of it. And then again, last piece was just understanding tenants and who's good, who's bad, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a big part of it too, is clearing out those guys right away, and not taking on certain headaches that you don't need to be taking on, since your energy should be focused towards other things besides problem tenants. Mr. Adam, what else did you learn from buying your first apartment?
I think the marketing piece and how you go out and attract tenants is a little different. So, I mean, you can list on, Zillow and others, that would be something similar across single family or, apartment building. But there's other pieces. I think one of the big things that stands out to me is curb appeal, which is important across the board with all real estate. It goes a long way. It's the first impression, whether it's single family or multifamily. But with multifamily, it's not only how does the facade look and what does the landscaping look, which might be kind of universal across all real estate, although there's some subtle differences there of like how big the facade is of multifamily, right? Like that's a lot. There's a lot to the exterior that would be a significant investment on multifamily, whereas on single family, if you're just painting the exterior of the house, it's relatively minimal upfront cost, right? You're doing around the whole building, that's significant. So recognizing that curb appeal is really important within real estate, attracting right tenants, and that expense across that magnitude of a multifamily property could be extremely significant, but it's also well worth the investment of getting the right tenants. So interior and exterior is really, really, really important.
Yeah, I think we start working on the exterior too, and right off in the beginning, it lets the tenants know that, hey, these new owners are coming in and they're really churning things around. Because obviously a big play on buying multifamily is value add opportunities, and one of those is raising rents. So we're always transparent with tenants about it. We're like, hey, we're going to be investing a lot of money into this property, and in return, we are going to be raising rents a bit, but it speaks a lot louder when you're going in and you're doing all this stuff to the outside, so they actually see that, oh yeah, these guys really are committed to turn around this property, and them understanding that there is going to be a rent increase coming along, and for us to be able to increase rents, it's got to be worth it. We can't just go in and
got to provide value.
Yeah, you got to provide value, and that goes starting from the outside in, going in. It's a huge help, and I think one thing for me talking about the outside was the lighting. There was really shitty lighting at both properties, but going in and just lighting that place up, like we got the brightest LED lights. We added a bunch of LED lights. We had the city come out and change out some of their street lights right around our property to LED lights. It was a bit of a process, but adding that additional lighting goes a long ways for safety purposes, and for tenants, again, feeling safe at that property, and also deters, I don't want to say bad things from happening, but deters certain things from happening that can happen when places are poorly lit, especially when you're trying to turn a place around that may have some undesirable, has a bad reputation and can attract bad people. Now with the, like 29th was a good example, with that thing super nice and lit up, that alone started to deter a lot of what was going on there previously.
Yeah. And signage was another one for me. I always kind of just was baha about signage, whatever, who cares?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I started recognizing, as I was, seeing other apartment complexes, oh, that looks really nice on the outside. That's the type of place that I would want to stay at, for instance. And, that's the way I've learned, along the way, or one of the ways in which I've learned. And signage was a big piece of that, like a lit up sign, or even just a bigger sign that looks really nice. Again, it's that first feeling. And one of your best marketing tactics is just somebody driving by and, oh, that looks like a really nice building. Yeah. How can I rent that? Oh, here's a sign. Here's a number to call. Here could be a link with a QR code to our website, sort of thing. So there's some great options there that I undervalued the importance of signage that I learned from that process.
Yeah. I would say one last thing for me probably is the installation of cameras around your property. Never really thought about it much on these smaller complexes that we were initially buying. But once you start taking over the complexes and start dealing with some of the tenants and them saying, hey, this has been going on, or this has been going on, there's really no way for you to verify some of that stuff. So we're starting to get some of that in. And then a big catalyst to put cameras up was that, and then also the amount of trash that was around our dumpsters. People were just coming in off the street and throwing couches next to our dumpsters and other things, and we thought it was some tenants, so we'd send out notice to tenants, and tenants would say, it wasn't me, and it's like, okay, it's one of you guys for sure. And so eventually you get cameras up, and then those cameras obviously tell the truth on anything. So we were able to find out the people that were illegally dumping at our apartments, able to find out what tenants were having large get-togethers constantly that were disturbing other tenants. Because you do start to get complaints from tenants about, hey, this tenant's doing this or this tenant's doing that, and our first reaction is like, well, did you talk to that tenant directly? Like, we're not your mediator, we're not your parents. Like, you need to talk to your neighbor. It's your neighbor first off, but you need to talk to them directly about any issues you have. And then some people just don't get along. So what they're conveying to us, is it fully truthful, or is it embellished a little bit, or what is it? So having these cameras up, it goes a long ways to really see what's going on at your properties, who's doing what, and just helps you keep an eye overall on what I would say the health of your property, the outside of it.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I agree, brother.
Yeah. Cool. Good?
Good shit, man.
It's a good book.